Welcome to Unapologetically Yours, a podcast where we go deep on everything from spirituality to relationships and connection to business and belief systems. Because in a world where we've been taught to play by the rules, it's time to live unapologetically. Hello, and welcome to the latest episode of Unapologetically Yours. I'm your host, Ashley Logan, and I am so happy to be sitting here in the blue room, newly painted, with my friend, colleague, co-conspirator, Annmarie Chereso. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
So Annmarie is a transformational coach. She is ushering the matriarch in many ways, starting with writing a book, from creating courses to sharing really beautiful, inspirational content on social media and on her blog. And we have so much that we can learn from this incredible woman. So thank you.
Thank you. What are we going to learn?
I don't know. You tell me. Well, first of all, I want to give you the chance to tell our listeners a little bit about you and how you're showing up today.
Well, I feel like you did a beautiful job of framing that already. I show up in the world as a transformational coach, but I think my life has informed who I am and who I get to be in the world. And I just like to share what I've learned with others to support the awakening of not only, you use the term matriarchy, which I really love, but awakening each one of us to our individual and then collective power for just like a better world.
Yeah, that's an amazing thing. And you've had an incredible journey, a hard journey. You've seen a lot. And from being a mom of 3 kids, a single mom of 3 kids, and knowing that the course of your life had to change and then having the agency to make those changes, which is just so courageous. And then now teaching women how they can have agency over their own lives, and not just women, men too. But tell us a little bit about your story and how you came to know that there was another way of being that you had to explore.
Yeah. So the story goes, I got married. I did all the things, like from a very young age, I felt like I'd been really connected to this part of myself that I'm going to say source. I wouldn't say when I was 12, I defined it as source. There was just this voice inside me. And it was very clear from the time I was 12 years old. There was a plan. I was going to go to design school. I was going to get married. I was going to have 3 kids. I was going to live in the city. I was going to make a certain amount of money, and I was going to do this thing, work in the world of interior design. And so in the 8th grade, I applied to design school. And I went in the yellow pages because back then there weren't computers and the internet. And I'm totally dating myself, but that's true. And I looked up schools and I found the school and I sent an application and whatever. And I didn't tell anyone. It was just like, this is what I'm doing. And they came back to me and they're like, you kind of need to go to high school first. And
Is 14 too young for design school?
Yeah, I was like, really? It seems like such a waste of time, but all right, I'll do what you say I have to do. So I muddled my way through high school and promptly went to design school. And, I followed that track, and there was my dad was saying are you sure? Because everyone else is doing this other thing. They're going to this other kind of college experience. And I'm like, no, actually, I'm pretty sure. And there was resistance from my parents, and not really my mom, but mostly my dad. And it wasn't aggressive resistance. It was just the doubtful resistance.
Sure.
And lucky for me, I didn't have super aggressive parents with their own agenda. But he was definitely I don't know. And what are you going to go figure out how to put pretty pillows on a sofa? What's an interior designer? And I'm like, I don't really know either, but I know that I'm supposed to do it. And I'm supposed to go to this school and I'm just going to do it. So he was like,
I'm laughing because when I made the switch from commercial real estate to go back to school to get my master's in journalism and start yakety yak, I was making great money. And I remember someone looking at me and be like, so you're going to go leave all this to go be a blogger? And I was like, something like that. But yeah. But following that path takes courage when you are met with resistance. So
at the time, it didn't feel like courage. It felt like instruction.
Right.
Like, no, this is what I was so deeply connected to this voice inside me, but I didn't know I was connected to a voice inside me. I just knew this is what I have to do. So anyway, I go do this thing, and it turned out to be a pretty intense program. And I remember this was a pivotal moment in life for me. And my dad came to me, and I'm like, I'm living at home. You know, I'm a college student, but I'm still living at home because that's the way it worked out. And I was up late drafting and doing this homework, and it was a hard program. And he came in my room, knocked on my door one day at like 12:30 at night. And he's like, I think I have to apologize to you. And I was like, what? He's like, this is actually the real deal. This is a real thing. Like, so I just want, basically I don't remember the exact words, but he took responsibility for his like judgment about fluff, going to design school and just being a fluffy career. And I remember it being really impactful for me. Like, oh, thank you. And I think it was a really powerful lesson for me around the masculine and my father and being fathered and taking responsibility and ownership and what that relationship would look like. All right. So that's not really answering your question, but I'm getting there.
Yeah. So I mean, it sounds like you have your next blog post.
I just thought about that. So what happened? So I go to design school. So it's part of my plan. Like, I have this whole plan. I know what I'm doing, and getting married and having kids at a particular time in life. It was all part of the plan. And I met all those goals. I met my financial goals. I met my now ex-husband. We got married at the time that I thought I was supposed to get married. That was all part of the plan.
Yeah.
And ended up having 2 kids, got pregnant with my 3rd kid on time, right? Because I don't think I said this yet, but when I was 16, I wrote up this plan, and it was written in 5-year increments. You know me, so this makes sense to you.
I do. Yeah. That deep Virgo energy.
It was. And it was like, okay, between the times of 16 and 20, I'm going to do this. 20 to 25, I'm going to do this. 25 to 30. I met all those goals. But what was interesting is at 16, the plan stopped at 35. I couldn't see past 35, which at 16, it made sense because
35 is so old.
So old.
So old when you're 16.
So old. I thought I was going to be married with 3 kids, have, fair amount of money, live in the city, have a couple of dogs. I was going to have the thing and have really long nails. So I'm 55.
The nails didn't work out.
I still have nails. I don't have them.
So what happened then? You got pregnant on time.
So I got pregnant with my 3 kids on time, preparing for my 3rd child. And I wake up to this big realization that my then husband was being unfaithful. And life threw me this giant flipping curveball.
And how many weeks pregnant were you?
I was 6 weeks pregnant at the time.
And just woke up with a knowing.
I just woke up at midnight, popped out of bed, and I got this voice inside me that said this thing. And I was like, well, that's kind of odd. That's really inconvenient. And I don't know what to do with that.
What timing, universe?
Well, thank you very much. And it wasn't making any sense in the context of the relationship because we weren't having like significant issues, or at least from my perspective, we weren't. Now, maybe if you were interviewing him, he would have a completely different perspective. Sure. But from my perspective, nothing significant was occurring. I mean, we just got pregnant, for goodness sakes. So the next 9 months goes on, and I was in a fair amount of resistance because this isn't part of the plan. Like getting divorced.
Funny how life throws those curveballs at you.
Yeah, this was not part of it. And I did everything I could to hold on to what my vision was, what my plan was. This included like staying married, raising my children with this man that I committed my life to in this particular way. And I pretty much fought it for the next 5 or 6 years. And every angle I could, every way I could manipulate and control and try and mold the situation into what I was believing it was supposed to be. And life wouldn't have it. Just life wouldn't have it. So a number of years later, after a load of drama, I mean, we're talking, like reality TV show drama, where we finally ended up going completely bankrupt, lost the house, foreclosed or short sailed on the house. Just everything kind of fell apart. And it was sort of my like rock bottom moment. And I was sort of left with nothing, absolutely nothing. And that's not entirely true, right? I had my kids, I had my health, I had so much. So it's not true I had nothing. But all the things that I thought I was going to have were stripped away.
And all the things you were so tightly gripping onto.
Yep.
In resistance of what was happening.
Yeah. So it's the, Pema Chodron's book, When Things Fall Apart, that was like on my bedside table, reading it over and over and over again. And I had to reimagine. I had to start over. And it was such a gift. But at the time, I couldn't see the gift. At the time, I was just drowning in fear and control and parenting and survival.
Right. Yeah, that's so hard. And so how then did that experience shape what your life as a coach and your professional path and how you're working with other people?
Yeah, this is a really interesting story. So now I'm a single mom, 3 kids, no money, and it's like 2008-ish. So the crash is happening. My now ex-husband is being investigated by the SEC, so he's unable to earn money. So now the both of us are unable to earn money. We've lost all our savings, all our money, because that's all gone. And I can't get work because there's no work. And I'm like trying to figure out, how am I going to parent 3 kids? How am I going to earn money? How am I going to do all this? And I don't, like, when I'm looking back at it now, it sounds insane. But when you're in it, you're just sort of getting through the days. You're just like moment by moment, because you have no choice. And I think this is the beauty of parenting and having particularly small children, is you have to be in the moment. You are required to be in the moment because they require you to be here now.
Right.
Because they're here now and their needs are here now. And you have 2 choices: meet them where they are or not. And most of us as mothers meet our kids where they are to the best of our ability. So I'm somehow or another, I don't remember, I'm driving to pick up my kids from school. I get a call from a girlfriend. I'm working a part-time job here and I'm working a part-time job here, and I'm like selling purses, and I'm doing all sorts of crazy things, and I'm trying to work while I'm simultaneously available for the kids in between school and all that. And a friend of mine calls me and she goes, she's moved. She's one of my closest friends. Hey, Krista, shout out to Krista. And she calls me and says, hey, I think you should do this thing. My other friend, Diane, is doing this Martha Beck life coach training thing, and I just think you should do it. And I was like, all right.
Okay.
How is that? She's like, yeah, you should call Diane. I'm like, all right. I'm sitting in car line. I've got 20 minutes before the kids get out. So I'm like, I'll just call her. I don't know. So I call her. She's talking about it. And I'm noticing I'm sort of feeling electric. I don't even know. At the time, I didn't know that there was a thing called body awareness, but I was feeling sort of lit up and excited. And one thing led to another. And I went home that day and I researched it. And I'm like, yeah, I think I should do this. Again, it was one of those like hints. I call them angel winks. Like something is pulling me or guiding me toward. It doesn't make sense. I didn't have any logical reason for it. And not only did it not make sense and did I not have a logical reason, I didn't know how I was going to pay for the training. I didn't know how any of those other pieces were going to, how I'd have time, how it was going to translate into money. It was going to cost me money instead of earn me money. So all of those things. But despite all that, I just kept feeling drawn or pulled. And I had to make a decision within 24 hours. So I call this other friend of mine and she goes, well, I know exactly where you can get the money. And she, that's another story, another podcast. And I was like, okay. She's like, you should borrow the money and I'll help you figure that out. And I think you should do it. And I was like, all right. So now everything's unfolding and it's unfolding rather easily. Like there's not a lot of detours or barriers. So the next day I sign up for this thing, this Martha Beck life coach training. And for the next 9 months, I get on this journey. And really what it was a real gift to me for like where I was in my life at the time. It was like, I don't know if you know who Martha Beck is. She's like Oprah's, Oprah put her on the map, I think. I don't even know if Oprah did, but she was Oprah's. She's written for Oprah magazine and she's been on Oprah a lot. And she's amazing. I shout out to Martha Beck. I've learned so much through that training. And what it did was just really inform me where I was in my life. It gave me so many tools to heal what I had just been through.
Right.
So much built-in support. It was like God or the universe or angels like sent down just like this load of support to hold me as I was navigating this post-divorce period and trying to figure it all out. So I did that. And then I immediately finished that and I contracted. And I got into a giant contraction. So I like to use the analogy of like giving birth. You and I both had the pleasure of giving birth. And I believe life is a series of expansion and contractions, you know? And so that was a giant expansion, like taking this course, studying with these great teachers and guides, learning all I was learning. And then it came time to like go out in the world and share. And I got scared and I got really contracted and I pulled back. And then my life has been a series of expansions and contractions around that ever since. So that's how I got into the coaching.
So I think one of the things that's so interesting to me is looking at your path of navigating massive change in your family, massive drama as a mom of 3 young kids, and then turning that into your path. I think it makes you uniquely equipped to help others navigate similar circumstances that were maybe unforeseen, unplanned. And one of the things that, so in full transparency, over the last couple of months, Annmarie and I started working together in a creation capacity, in a collaboration. And one of the things that I so appreciate about Annmarie is the way that you help hold space for people through transitions big and small. Mm-hmm. And whether that's unexpected, just normal low level anxiety to big changes like your kids moving out of the house for the first time, or death, grief, divorce, drama.
Yeah.
And I think that one of the pieces that has been so meaningful to me that I've learned more from you about is being in a disempowered state and being in an empowered state. And I would love for you to share a little bit more about first provide a little bit of context around like empowered state, disempowered state. And then I'd love to dive into the differences between those two so that people listening can start to check in around how they are showing up in the world.
Yeah, I think that was one of my biggest lessons, because I was asleep most of my life. And I was lucky because I was empowered by listening to that voice that I've been mentioning, because I didn't doubt it.
Yeah.
But I wasn't intentionally listening to it. I was just unconsciously listening to it. I didn't have a lot of roadblocks. But then as I started getting older, more fear started to creep in, when the stakes got higher, when things started to really matter, or in my mind, things started to really matter, that's when I started to notice the difference between this idea of being empowered or disempowered.
How does that tie to love versus fear?
Yes. Yeah, that's the thing. Like so the way I now understand it, and it took me years and years to get to this deeper understanding, is shortcutting, like empowered, disempowered is love versus fear. So when I'm in a state of consciousness of love, which really means I'm trusting life. I am trusting life to hold me. I am trusting life to guide me. Life is benevolent. I am here to learn. Life is my curriculum. When I'm in that state, I am deeply empowered. I have all the tools and resources available to me to support me in navigating whatever comes my way, versus being in this disempowered state where life is happening, something is happening to me and I have to control it and change it to fit my agenda, to fit my plan, to, like I was when I was going through my divorce. Like, actually, my divorce was happening and unfolding, that relationship was separating because that was the natural evolution of that relationship. It was complete. But because I was in resistance to that, I was fighting what life was trying to lead me towards. And then it just took longer for me to get where I was supposed to be going, which is also fine, right? We don't make that a problem. It's just, I got all the lessons I needed along the way. This is why we say it's about the journey and not the destination.
Right.
But I needed all those lessons of resistance, and I resisted hard. But I've learned along the way, like, anytime I'm in resistance, I'm in a disempowered state. Anytime I'm pushing against what life is bringing towards me, there's some way in which I'm not trusting something.
Okay, so I want to talk a little bit, because resistance is a word that people may not be familiar with. But how does resistance show up in your body and show up as a belief system?
Okay. Well, first, in my body, if my jaw is tight or clenched. I mean, raise your hand if your jaw is ever tight or clenched. I mean,
how many hours a day is your jaw
clenched? Always. And I catch myself all day long clenched. Even earlier today, when you and I first started meeting and we were sitting at the table, I was like, your jaw's clenched, and you're not breathing. So I just noticed that, opened my mouth, let some breath come in, and really breathed all the way down into my belly. So in my body, if there's any place in my body that's constricted, your big toe, check your big toe, check your hands. Often we walk with our hands clenched. Your throat, as women, our throats are clenched all the time. So I just pay attention. I am walking around the planet all day long, trying to tune in and pay attention to, where is my body clenched? Where am I holding on? Because any place I'm holding on, I'm not in flow. Right. So, that's the answer to that question. You asked another, I forgot.
I think that I asked a little bit about, I think I asked about empowered state too. And so how being in an empowered state.
Resistance.
Resistance. That's right.
How do we know if we're in resistance? Well, for me, that's it. If I'm clenching anywhere in my body, there's something I'm in resistance to. This happens like 9 months out of the year because we live in Chicago, and I resist the cold. So I'm like, my shoulders are clenched, my neck is tight, my hand, like I'm walking around in resistance to the cold 9 months out of the year.
That's very productive.
And when I'm in that state, I don't have access to everything. I don't have access to the full flow of life moving through me. So I practice paying attention. And then I also think you said something about resistance to life. And I think what I mostly notice, what I've mostly learned over the past 20 some odd years, is all the ways that I've been programmed and conditioned to believe certain things about life. The way life is supposed to work, the way it's supposed to look.
all of the truths that you set out, like you made a plan at your life at 14 years old based on those beliefs of the house, the marriage, the kids, the job, the money, and
the school,
and all those things, the school, and what that would look like. And so, when we're in a death grip for completing those things.
Yes. So when you're checking off the list, which we've all done, and then you get there and you're like, wait a minute, what's the price? Like, I did it. Now what? Right. And then you get there and you realize, like, well, this is sort of empty and not really filling me up. So now what am I going to do? Now I've got this. And now I think what I have found has happened in myself and many others is we get there, we don't know what to do next because we're a little bit frozen and we're feeling like this is not quite doing it, but we don't actually even know what the options are. What's the other option? Yeah,
I think that's true. When you think about, then you start to notice that resistance, and the importance is to look at it, look at it and say, okay, why am I feeling this way? What could I be doing differently? What do I need to take a closer look at? What do I need to work through? What conflict has arisen that needs to be addressed? And then having the courage to have those conversations or to address those belief systems, because I think that so many of us get stuck without even knowing it in a state of disempowerment. And I don't want to suggest by any means that going through life and checking those boxes means that you're going to automatically be unhappy or happy. It's just having the agency to see that something is working or something needs to be evolved or something needs additional attention. And by zooming in on it, by clicking on it, then you can figure out what's for you, what's not for you, what relationships need to be nurtured, what beliefs need to be examined, picked up, turned around, put down, or reshaped.
I think I was really lucky because I had those earlier experiences with listening to my voice. And I had a connection to that inner guide.
Right.
And so it wasn't a long path for me to go back and listen again because I had so many positive experiences with it. So to reconnect with that voice and start listening from a new lens, I remember this idea of being interior designer, and I started doing it and I had a lot of fun, but I knew I'm only going to do this during my 20s. And then I'm going to go back to school and I'm going to become a child psychologist. That's what I thought I was going to end up doing. That didn't happen, but it's not actually that far off what I'm doing in the world. And I realized that when I was an interior designer, it's like, I don't want to design people's exterior worlds. I want to help design people's interior worlds.
Wow.
What's happening from the inside out.
Sure.
And so this way in which we're setting ourselves up to live a life that our culture or our family or society is telling us this is what your life should look like, and we're disconnecting from that voice within ourselves, that's where I think we get into trouble. And I think as a mother, I've been really devoted to helping support my kids in finding their true north. This is a very Martha Beck thing. She wrote a book called Finding Your Joy. I think that's the right title of the book. If it's not, I apologize, but I'm unapologetically yours. But she talks about listening to that inner spark, finding that joy within it. And that's actually my daughter, when she graduated college, it's one of the books I gave her. I'm like, okay, you've read all the important books, you went to the big school, you did all the things they told you, but I want you to read this book now. And this book is about finding your truth inside you and then following that, having the courage to follow that. Because you just spent 18 years of your life doing what culture thinks you should do, but now's the time for you to find what you need, what you want to do.
What do you think is the importance of someone following their own true north?
Yeah, because we're all here divinely guided to contribute to the collective well-being of the planet. And if you're not lit up in doing what you're here to do, then you're dragging us down, right? And so if we're all lit up and on purpose and in our passion, I don't know, can you imagine what the world would be like?
Yeah, be pretty special.
Yeah.
So I have a question for you. So as we look at like empowered state of minds versus disempowered state of minds, disempowered state, you not focusing on that agency, not trusting your body, not having awareness, or maybe you are hearing those things, but you don't have the courage to act on it.
Yeah.
So what does it feel like to be in an empowered state? And how is that something that can, following that kind of buzz can get you on course?
Well, it's scary, first of all. It's such a big question. I'm trying to chunk it down.
Let's start with like, what's it look like to be in an empowered state?
Yeah.
What are the signs?
Well, I think it's, you're happy. I mean, it's so simple. You're happy. You feel like fully alive and connected. I also want to say something it doesn't mean. It doesn't mean life feels easy. Mm-hmm. I'm sort of going back to advice I'm giving my young adult kids right now, because they're both like 2 out of 3 of them are starting out in life. And I'm like, this is the hard part, by the way. Like, you thought college and all that, or that time in life was hard. That's not the hard part. The hard part is now, but it's also super delightful and fun. And for me, it's like being empowered is like following the gingerbread crumbs of joy in your life and letting them lead you to this unknown place. I had no idea I was going to be sitting in this chair with you, 2 months ago, 5 years ago, 20 years ago. But I followed the things that lit me up, and life is bringing, I'm following the plan life has for me, because I'm listening to that deeper voice within, and I'm not necessarily listening to the fear. Now, that doesn't mean fear hasn't interfered, because it does.
Right.
And then when it does, I get a consequence. Something happens, which is usually like, this isn't as fun. I have some drama. I'm uncomfortable. I'm not happy. There's disconnection occurring between me or someone else. I'm overwhelmed. Like, there's a million ways in which we can catch ourselves in those disempowered states. But when then you have the courage to overcome those big leaps, you start, I'm thinking about Gay Hendricks' book right now, Big Leap, got distracted. You start to get into alignment with yourself and your passion and your purpose and your reason for being on this planet and your joy and all the things. It's what I most wish for my kids. The thing I most wish for them
is that they can find a way to trust their own inner wisdom and follow the path.
Yes.
That they so desire.
That is their right and perfect path for them.
Right.
Right. Not what school or culture or their grandparents or their, the magazines or anyone has told them, but what is yours to do? What is yours to do? I
imagine as a mom, that means letting go of a fair amount of control.
Well,
and attachment to outcomes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And just giving them space.
I have a lot of gratitude to my parents. They definitely did not do this consciously. But they were pretty hands-off as parents in terms of like, they didn't have a necessary agenda for me and my brothers and sisters. Now, they wanted us to go to a good school. My dad really wanted us to go to college. He believed he was giving us a gift. He didn't get to go to college. So, that whole paradigm and storyline, like the next generation is doing better and all that stuff.
Of course.
So there was a lot of attachment to that. But I never felt super pressured or pushed. But then when I started raising my kids, and I'm sure you're feeling this with raising your kids, I remember this so clearly when Robert, my now 25-year-old, we were applying for preschool, by the way. So I don't know how many of you listening in have had to apply to get your kids into preschool. And not everyone does, but we lived in the city and that's the way you do it. People started asking me, well, where do you want me to go to college? And I was like, what are you he's in that sandbox eating sand right now. What are you talking about? Where's he going to go to college? I have no idea where he's going to go to college. And they're like, well, you need to choose that to decide what is the best preschool for him. And I'm like, well, this is a whole new world. Like,
oh my God.
I don't know what you're talking about. I just want him to like get into a school so he can go to school. But then I started to see that there's this whole other game people are playing. And I didn't quite know how to fit into that game because I never played that game before. So
the game of deep attachment to outcomes on behalf of your kids.
Yes.
Yeah.
I was just like, well, I'm just going to take him for a bath. And then hopefully he'll get into preschool next year.
Right.
And like,
get into preschool.
We'll just take this day by day. I don't know what college he should get into. How am I supposed to know that right now? But then I started to see that, oh, there's this whole culture. There's this whole mindset around there's a plan and you step into agency over that plan. You take control of that plan. And I didn't know that going into it. So
as I think about, one, as mothers, we have a choice about how much control that we're showing over our kids. But I feel a little hesitant to go down that path. I kind of want to bring this back to thinking about like the mother. So some of the work that you're doing right now around the book that you're writing and the content that you're sharing and the courses that you've created is about empowering mothers, because you have this incredible message that mothers hold the key and the wisdom, because we're mothering each other, whether or not you're an actual mother or not.
Yep.
You are creating to the learning experiences of the people around you. And so when you are mothering from an empowered state, a state that isn't in resistance, a state that isn't in control, and whether you're mothering young children or your adult children, and how you're showing up in the world, that impact, that ripple effect is pretty massive, because the way that we are perpetuating limiting beliefs on behalf of the next generation, or we're creating space and a roadmap for them to have agency over their own lives, and with the support, love of the mother.
Guidance.
And the guidance. Yeah. So I think about how much we're served as mothers around the individualism, like, mom, you got this, mama, show up in this state. You're the one who's making all the decisions. You're doing it alone.
We don't got it. We don't got it. I mean, we shouldn't.
And we're taught to do it alone. Yeah. And so I want to hear from you a little bit about how we can, as mothers, start to break down some of those limiting beliefs and those paradigms that have been built into our culture to start leading the way for the next generation, regardless of if we are a mother in our 70s of adult children, or just starting on the parenting journey now, or someone who is being mothered.
I love this conversation. First of all, it's like multifaceted. There's a million directions, but there's this story that keeps coming through me as you're talking. So we'll see if it ties into what you're saying, but I'm going to trust what's coming through me right now. So my youngest, who's now 20, was born with tremendous anxiety. Like, they called it colic. It was like colic times 1,000. And it turns out she just was growing inside of an incredibly anxious womb, because my nervous system was off the charts because I was going through a divorce and all this stuff at the time. So she literally inherited my anxiety, and she came out. She cried 12 to 14 hours a day. I cried with her the whole time. It was a horrific time. Oh, and I spent those first 5 years parenting her. Now, mind you, single parent, 2 other kids, I'm taxed. You know, you've been there when you got a couple of people depending on you. I'm exhausted. I don't have any mental, emotional, physical resources. I'm just doing the very best I can.
Right.
And she, quote unquote, was a problem. because she was crying 12 hours a day. And so I was putting all my time and all my energy trying to fix her, trying to solve the problem of what was wrong with her. She's got anxiety. Oh, that poor girl. She must be, it must be so, I don't know. I had all these stories about this infant. Like, she doesn't have a father at home, and this is terrible, and she's growing up in a broken family. And, I had all these limiting beliefs that were driving the way I was parenting her. And I'll never forget one time we were traveling, and my older son at the time was like, we need to have an intervention. This is out of control, Mom. You're like, because what I was doing at the time was anything I could to get her to not cry or not throw a temper tantrum or not get upset. And as she got older, her temper tantrums got bigger and wilder and crazier, and I was afraid of her. So one day after I started doing some of this work, I was taught this technique. And what this technique was really about like me shifting my vibration, shifting the way I was showing up, and seeing the impact it would have on her. So I did this thing. She was like having a temper tantrum, and I like shifted my own vibration, and I did this funny thing. I'll never forget, we were standing in the kitchen, and I made like a monkey face or did something like that. And she just kind of like looked around. She's like, well, like, what are you doing? And basically what I was shifting, and we've talked about this, Laura Berman, a friend of mine, has a thing called the quantum love map. And I just basically shifted my vibration so that I was in a higher state. And then all of a sudden she started getting really curious, and she came over to me and she started literally mirroring. She was probably 4 years old, mirroring what I was doing. And I realized in that moment how much power I had. It was in that moment I was like, oh, I'm running the show here. Like, I'm actually controlling everything that's going on in this space, but I have allowed her to control it because I was afraid of her. She had all the power. Her temper tantrum, her anger, her frustration, her anxiety had the power over me. But I realized in that moment, I could shift anything if I just pay attention to myself. And in that moment, she and I started to unravel that we had a deeply codependent relationship. And then I had to spend the next decade literally undoing all the programming that she had inherited from my womb and my anxiety and my stress and my drama. And I had to be patient as she learned. But I had to keep leveling myself up. And she had to keep in training with me and matching me.
It's so interesting because I think that shows like we have to take care of ourselves first as mothers.
Yes.
And then we can show up to parent and mother in the way that is leading from an empowered state.
Yes.
So one of the things that we've also talked about quite a bit is like content
versus context.
Yeah. And I think that one of the loops that we get trapped in as mothers, as people, as humans showing up in this world is telling ourselves stories that create drama.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about this concept?
This is great. And now I know why I just told that story. So if we take us back to that story, my daughter's having a temper tantrum. She's struggling with anxiety. That's the content. The context is how I'm being with what's happening. For me, how I was being for many years was I was also being in anxiety, anger, frustration. So to mother myself in those moments meant I had to meet myself first where I was, which was I was just in a deep state of fear. I'm like, I don't know how to control this out of control little tiny being who seems to be controlling the entire house. Anyone who's had a baby understands a tiny little 8-pound creature is controlling the entire system. So to mother myself in that moment, I had to go, oh, honey, you're just scared. This tiny little 4-year-old feels out of control to you and you don't know what to do. You don't like it. It's uncomfortable. It's inconvenient. It's noisy. It's impacting the other kids in the family system. You feel out of control. And so I had to go over there and just sit with myself for a minute. And what that looked like in the moment was let her continue to tantrum and handle my own inner tantrum and mother myself, like nurture myself. Let that one feel scared, like, I've got you. We can do this. You're okay. And then once I walked through that portal or that doorway of fear, then I got to meet the next one, which is like, God damn it. Like, why is she doing this? And like, I was a little angry. So I got to meet my anger. And then when I kind of nurtured that part, I kept going through the doorways until I got to like compassion and understanding and love and acceptance. Like, so all those doorways lead us back to like this core, which mother is to nurture one back to its natural self, which is love. And so when I nurtured myself back to love, then I was able to be that space of love for her to come in. So now she says, oh, that's safe. That's familiar. I recognize that's light. That's the light. I want to go towards that, even inside of my temper tantrum. And then I'm able to hold her tantrum in love. And then she can remember herself the way she is in her natural state. And that is the power of mothering.
Wow.
That's what we can do. But we have to first know how to do it for ourselves.
I'm just sitting with that for a second about just one, like the importance of creating those safe spaces for our children, but then also the importance of acknowledging where we are in our state of mind. And when we are experiencing fear, when we are experiencing self-doubt, and then sitting, taking a deep breath, and then elevating or choosing to move forward or calming ourselves to a space where we can hold someone else. And if we can't recognize that with ourselves, we can't create the space for someone else.
Yeah. And sometimes I can't do it. Sometimes I'm not available, and I have to acknowledge that and accept that and set a boundary. Like, you go over there and have your temper tantrum, in your bedroom where it's safe. And I'm going to go over and do my thing, or in my adult relationship with my now husband or my mother or whomever in the world. But when we know how to honor ourselves and meet ourselves where we are and accept ourselves for, like, I'm at capacity right now, so I'm not able to get into that space of unconditional love. And that's okay. I'm doing the best I can because I'm just a flippin' human being. Like, we're just being human. So it's not like every time that happens, we're supposed to get into that space. It's every time it happens, we reach for it, and then we get as far as we get and accept ourselves along the way.
So as you think about reaching these mothers on the whole spectrum, again, mothers who are just starting their parenting journey to mothers who are, have adult children who are still navigating their relationships, I'm curious if you have any advice or practices that you'd recommend for our listeners about how to hold that space first with yourself so that you can show up in a stronger, more empowered capacity for our kids.
Yeah, well, my first answer is always meditation, because I'm rooted in meditation and mindfulness, and those skills have been paramount for me. But I also know that's not everyone's path. So many of us can use meditation as a deep practice, but
do you think that so many people are afraid that, like, meditation is sitting in Om posture by yourself in deep silence for 20, 30, 40 minutes or an hour at one time, which is impossible if you have small kids.
Yeah.
But meditation can look like taking a walk in nature. It can look like a lot of different things too.
We could do walking meditation. It's stilling the mind.
Mm-hmm.
It's not even, I don't even like to say stilling the mind. It's a practice of getting to know the mind.
Yeah.
But I think meditation is a great practice in lots of different forms. But I think the most important thing is creating the space that you need. So your space is going to look very different than my space. So you have to get to know yourself well enough to know what is best for you, what's required for you to get into those spaces so you can listen to yourself. That's it. And so for me, it looks like meditation.
Tune into that little voice.
Yeah. how do I get the junk out of the way so that I can hear that voice inside and follow that voice, trust that voice? So yeah, I think for me, just like sitting in my yard in the summer and looking at the tree is like a beautiful meditation experience for me. But also sitting in my, yoga space and meditating for 40 minutes. Now that my kids are grown and out of the house, I have the luxury of time to do that. But that's not everyone's, but you can meditate while you're washing the dishes. Like you can just be, it's like, it's a practice of being present in the moment. So if that means being present while I'm washing the dishes and feeling the water on my hands and the temperature and the slimy soap, and then that is an opportunity. That's like it's like a portal to connecting to yourself. First, you're connecting through your sensations, then you connect through your thoughts and feelings, and you get all that out of the way and you connect with yourself.
I love this so much. I think that so many of us can, and this one thing I've talked about a lot is we're in this cycle of go, 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 go. I think we said this earlier, doing, yes, instead of being. And that is by design in many ways, or just a byproduct of this culture of, go, go, go.
Yeah.
Moms, I think, carry a lot of that load when it comes to managing the kids' schedules and taking them from point A to point B and carrying that mental load, and creating the space to just tune in to your own desires, to the whisper of your soul, so that you can be present in your marriage, be present in your life, be present as a mother, as a person in this world, and giving yourself that gift of presence, the gift of worthiness, to show that, like, yes, I do matter, what I want matters, and that you can show up. And that is the key to showing up as your full self as a parent and
as a person, as a woman, as a contributor to our communities, and all of it. A funny story is coming up. So my son was 18 months old when I quit my first job. I had a great job I loved. I was making 6 figures. I was making a lot of money. I loved what I was doing, but I had that pull to stay home, and the universe organized it that I had to quit my job and stay home. So that's also another podcast. But I was still in that go, go, go stage where I was like, I had a Palm Pilot. Do you remember Palm Pilots?
Yes.
I had a Palm Pilot, and I had a schedule, and I had all these things. And so when I quit, I was like, all right, we're going to do wiggle worms on Mondays, and then on Tuesdays we're going to do gymnastics, and on Wednesdays we're going to do this, and we're going to, I had the whole schedule planned out like I was working. And I'll never forget, you just reminded me when you said go, go, go about this. Like day 3 or something, like I'm waking up in the morning, and I'm showering, and I'm working out, and I'm and he's like putting Cheerios in his face and blueberries in his ear, and I'm like, hurry up and let's hurry, we got to get ready. And we get to wiggle worms or whatever, and he just looks at me, he barely can talk, and he's like, Mommy, stay home, play, Mommy. And that like burned in my brain. I'm like, oh, you just want to stay home and play. Like, we don't need to be doing all this stuff, this enrichment. I was doing that for me. I was doing that because I was thinking the culture thinks I should do this, so I should do this for him because it's better for him. He's like, Mommy, stay home, play.
Well, that also brings up the thing about of love versus fear.
Yeah.
So you having the awareness to check in with yourself and be like, okay, so why am I doing this? Why am I pushing this agenda? Why did I sign up for all of these things? Because of the perception that you need to be busy, the perception that self-inflicted, then the perception that you've got to do all these things for your kids, society inflicted, and then to stop, tune in, and say, actually, we're going to be just fine if we don't. And we stay home with our blueberries and our Cheerio crumbs,
or better off,
and maybe better off. So thank you for all of this reflection. This is so helpful. And I know that the number one thing when it comes to, we've talked about tuning in, creating stillness, creating spaciousness, and then choosing love over fear, or at least having awareness of when you are choosing fear, when you're operating from a disempowered state and creating and looking at it.
I really appreciate what a good listener you are.
Oh, thanks. Well, I have
And
so
the
much.
way you wrap that up, I was like, we did?
We covered all of that.
That's really good.
Well, no, I mean, we were talking about this earlier, as I have learned so much from you about presence and nuance and continuing to show up for people in right relationship and building trust through communication. And it's really meant so much to me. And I feel like you have such a deep commitment to helping people just take these little steps to get in alignment with not only the best way to serve yourself, but to also show up and serve the next generation. Because the truth is, like, we are the ancestors that we hoped for. Like, change can start with us. We can mother our daughters differently. We can mother our sons differently. And knowing and creating that space and that agency around doing things differently and taking a step back and checking in with yourself on what works for you, what works for your child, and what doesn't.
Yeah.
That's one of the most empowering things that we can do for each other, and show up for ourselves and show up for our kids.
Yeah.
So,
and I know that, like, you and I have enjoyed working together, and in full transparency, you and I have had our like struggles. Like we've had a little tug of war, and like we're like, I don't know, but underneath that, there's been this voice in me is like, no, you have to stay here. There's something, and I think you have that voice too.
Yeah.
And there's something, and I can see after spending the day together, like how that's unfolding and why. So like, it's another example of, like, even though there's a lot of times where I've been like, all right, I don't know, like, we are not getting this. I don't know where we're not. But
to provide a little bit of context, so like, I am a wild Sagittarius, and Annmarie is a very grounded Virgo.
I'm very organized and
she's
structured.
Organized in this, and I'm free spirited and fluid, and that fluidity can be really disruptive to her nervous system that needs grounding.
But it's also great for me at times too.
Well, and so is your ability to stay grounded and consistent, kind of pull us back. So what I've learned is that our relationship together has been one of the most expansive in recent memory, because of your commitment to showing up every day and acknowledging where you are, where we are, and taking us to a more empowered state together. Let's talk through it. Let's figure out where we are, where we aren't, where we're going, where we're staying. And that commitment to learning, and that commitment to really nurturing and mothering this partnership has been helpful to me, because I have a tendency to abandon. I have a tendency to say, well, I guess this isn't it, and then moving on to the next thing. So it's teaching me the art of critical conversations, and I think that and it also is indicative of the way that you show up in the world with patience. Like, you are the ultimate mother. There's no doubt in my mind that you embody what it means to be a modern matriarch, and how you can help show other women who mother a path forward that includes and gathers the children of multi-generations, so that we can move forward together to a more aligned state, a state that examines truth, that builds trust, that leads with love. So I'm so grateful for that.
That was so beautifully said again. Thank you.
Oh, thanks. Good thing we're recording it. So I'm so super delighted today, because I want to give a shout out to our summer intern, Nora Berger, who has been helping in a huge variety of ways, one of which was painting this
set.
Helping paint the set. So Annmarie is our first guest in our newly painted, fresh, Unapologetically Yours set. And so I'm so glad to have you here. You are a ray of sunshine. And before we close out, I want to ask you what you are doing to show up in the world unapologetically.
Oh, that's a good question. Speaking my voice, speaking my truth. I'm practicing that more and more. Yeah.
Well, you have a very calming voice. I really love talking to you, just listening to you. And thank you, because your voice deserves to be heard. And so how can people find you?
AnnmarieChereso.me. That's a tricky name to spell, so I bet you'll have it in your show notes.
We will.
And on Instagram at Annmarie Chereso.
Okay. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank
so
you.
grateful to have you. So grateful to be in your presence and learn from you always.
Well, I wanted to say thank you.
Oh,
That was really fun. More fun than I expected.
and, well, I mean, the setting is it's really doing it for me.
I think it's more than the setting. I mean, this is so the way, look at what you just did. You didn't take credit for the part you play. You're like, oh, the setting. It's really fun to be in the setting.
I mean, I did pick the colors, so I guess I had something to do with it.
Yes,
But
you cultivated a beautiful space, but I really had fun. Thank you.
hey. All right. Well, follow along for Annmarie. She has so much incredible content coming out over the next coming months. She's using her voice finally. We're so grateful. And the matriarch thanks you for all of the work that you're doing and what you're going to bring to women.
Thank
everywhere.
you. Thanks
So,
for coming
thank
along
you.
with me and guiding me.
Of course. All right. Until next time, thank you so much for tuning in. Go out, make some mischief in the world. And until then, I'm Ashley, and I'm unapologetically yours.